Sodanandana Janarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jabihari Jai Om Shripad Paramahamsa Prabhujakacharya Stotara Sata Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Shri Caitanya Charitamrita Ki. Oh, glories to the symbol of devotees. Oh, glories to the symbol of devotees. Glories to the symbol of devotees. Oh, glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktivinoda. We are reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita this morning, Adi-lila, chapter 14, entitled Lord Chaitanya's Childhood Pastimes. We'll read text 40, 41, 42, and we have text number 40 on the board. Shishu Sabalaya Pada Pada Siragare Churi Kari Dravya Kaya Mare Balakare Shishu Sabalaya Pada Pada Siragare Churi Kari Dravya Kaya Mare Balakare Shishu Sabalaya Pada Pada Siragare Churi Kari Dravya Kaya Mare Balakare. Shishu, children, Saba, or Laye, taking with him Padapasashira, neighbouring, Gari, in the houses, Kurikari, stealing, Dravya, eatables, Kaya, eats, Mare, bites, Balakari, with other children. Translation: as usual for small children, he learns to play, and with his playmates he went to the houses of neighbouring friends, stealing their eatables and eating them. Sometimes the children fought amongst themselves. Text 41. All the children lodged complaints with Satyamata about the Lord's fighting with them and stealing from the neighbours' houses. Therefore sometimes she used to chastise or rebuke her son. So it goes, Kene kuri kare kene maharashi suri kene parigariya kibina higari. Satyamata said, why do you steal others' things? Why do you beat the other children? And why do you go inside others' houses? What do you not have in your own house? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedanta Sutra, Janmati Asya Yata, since creation, maintenance and annihilation exist in the Supreme Absolute, whatever we find within this material world is already in the spiritual world. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. How he is stealing and how he is fighting, it is not as a thief or an enemy, but as a friend in a loving condition. He steals as a child, not because he is in want, but as a natural instinct. In this material world also, small children without enmity or bad will sometimes go to a neighbouring house and steal. Sometimes they fight. Krishna also, like other children, did these things in his childhood. Without the existence of the stealing propensity and fighting propensity in the spiritual world, they cannot exist in this material world. The difference between the material and the spiritual worlds is that stealing in the spiritual world is done in friendship and love, whereas fighting and stealing within this material world are executed on the basis of enmity and envy. Therefore, we should understand the spiritual world, these activities exist, but there is no inebriety, whereas in the material world, all activities are full of miserable conditions. Durgame parimendasya skalapati gatimuhu Sakripa yustadana shintashantavalammanam amakyanati mirandasya Jananjaya sulakaya Chakshurmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this is rather, how shall we say, rather complicated sloka to be talking about, because here we have in this highest literature that the Supreme Lord, as a child, is acting in such a manner where is causing a lot of trouble. Just it seems to be incongruous from what we have learnt in this material world. It's just like religion, as we know, all the different personalities, all the saints of the religion, they're all being known to be all good. Just like if we were brought up as Christians, then we never hear of Jesus doing these things when he was a young boy, or if we were a Buddhist, we know the Buddhist was, we never heard about Buddha fighting or stealing or anything like that. He was very straightforward. Lord Ram, he was exemplary. And yet we have the Supreme Personality of Godhead acting in this manner. So to begin with, we have to explain the situation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just like Srila Prabhupada says, Janmediya Syayata. So also it is said, Lord Brahma, actually simultaneously as we're talking about Chaitanya Charitamrita, we're talking in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Brahma is describing all the qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how he's got so many wonderful, innumerable pastimes and qualities, and that the devotees are eternally glorifying him. So the Supreme Persons we know is Krishna, Ishvara, Brahma, Krishna. So he's the Supreme Eternal, he's Satchidananda Vigraha, full of bliss, knowledge and eternity, and Anadiradir Govinda is no beginning, or there is no end to Krishna. He's eternal. And Sarva Karana Karanam, he's the cause of all causes. So he's that Supreme Person. So from him we have all the other different expansions that come about. So we've been reading in the Bhagavatam that his original expansions, Baladev, Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, come from him, and then from Baladev comes Sankarshan, from Sankarshan comes Mahavishnu, and then Mahavishnu is lying in this great big causal ocean, these little bubbles are coming out, and within the bubbles these universes are forming, these bubbles form into universes, and within the universe he expands himself as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, which is the expansion of Aniruddha. So all these vast innumerable expansions of the Lord in this vast process of the creation, and then we get Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma is glorifying Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Creator. So Prabhupada explains the fact that Krishna he's living in his own abode in Vrindavan Dham, and he's enjoying his pastime separate from all this. All this is going on. All these expansions, Narayan expansion from Pradyumna and all the planets in the spiritual world, and then this corner of the material world. It's just vast, it's unlimited, it's just like beyond our imagination. And it's all going on, and Krishna's enjoying Vrindavan, just enjoying his pastimes. So Prabhupada explains that the first sloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, Janvidiyasya Itaratas Abhigyasvarat, is that whatever exists in the material realm must also exist in the spiritual world. We're just a reflection. So the word Prabhupada often uses is variegatedness. That variegatedness means like full of surprises. I was once Sridananda Maharaj was here giving a lecture, and he was talking about Christianity, and he's saying, well, what is the concept of heaven? What happens when you go to heaven? Do we just sit there and all our friends are there, we just look at the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What do we do when we get to heaven? So by all aspects, the process of worship of the Supreme Lord in all the other faiths is one of awe and reverence, that we somehow rather look upon the Lord as awe and reverence. But this variegatedness is something else, that there is a sort of differentiation in personalities. So in one's personality, there's so much unlimited activities within the Supreme Person that is also reflective in the spirit soul who's part and parcel of Krishna. So when Krishna appears in his original form, once every day, Lord Brahma on this planet, he comes for a purpose. In Bhagavad Gita, it describes Paritranaya Sadnam Nasyacha Duskritam, that he comes to annihilate the miscreants and establish religious principles. And of course, I was just sort of like meditating on this. Sometimes we just sort of paraphrase what we hear in the Bhagavad Gita. Paritranaya Sadnam Nasyacha Duskritam Dharma Samstapaye Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. It's very nice, we sing along. And whenever, I'll get mixed up with song, whenever and wherever there is a rise in religious principles, I descend myself in my original form to annihilate miscreants and re-establish religious principles. But when we're talking about religious principles, we're actually talking about bhakti, which is meant to attract, the highest religious principle is meant to attract all the living entities who have lost their way in the material world back to Godhead. And of course, Krishna wants to attract these living entities as his devotees back to Vrindavan. Of course, those who are looking for other paths, they may worship Narayan and Lord Vishnu, and they also attain liberation back in the Vaikuntha planets. There's unlimited Vaikuntha planets, but all those are in the mood of awe and reverence. So Krishna is amazing, actually, when he comes here. So he comes to annihilate the miscreants and re-establish religious principles and give pleasure to devotees, and he does this all at the same time. So when he's right from the very birth, when he was born, we know that he actually was taken across the river and dropped off in Mother Jasoda's place. And when Kamsa found out that Krishna was born somewhere else, he went after him. And so what did he do? Straight after he found out, he sent one of his, I'm not going to do a question and answer, I'm just sort of trying to keep everybody perked up, but he sent one of his stable of demons, whose name was the Putana witch. So if anybody mentioned Putana in Mathura, the Mathura citizens would be totally fearful and afraid, because this witch was so powerful that just by a glance she could just destroy you. She was a mystic yogi, and she had the power to, as in Radhanath Maharaja's words, she was powerful enough to annihilate any army that we would put up against her because of the power of the mystic yogi. Of course, her brothers, does anybody know her brothers' names? One, give me one, have a guess. No? Who? Great try. No, it was Aghasura, the big snake demon, and Bakasura. So when Kamsa went in search of all the big demons all around his province, he come across these two brothers and his sister. So he fought with Aghasura and he defeated him, and he fought with Bakasura, but he wouldn't fight with the Putana witch because she was a woman. But because he subjugated the brothers, she came along and joined that huge stable of demons, and citizens of Mathura were in great fear. All these demons were lurking around, and you wouldn't be sure whether you went outdoors and you'd be eaten or not. So this is like this is what was going on in Mathura. So Kamsa first of all sent his biggest demon, Putana. So she came as a beautiful lady. She transformed herself. Even though she was a hideous demon, the most beautiful lady, like a nursemaid, come in after a couple of days. Krishna was born. Mother Yasoda was still there with all her maids in a separate place, and she found Krishna, and she was so beautiful, so she just picked up Krishna and put him to her breast. And she had enough poison said to kill 10,000 elephants on her breast. And then Krishna being this tiny little baby, so we know what babies are like, about 10 years old. So he's got these tiny little fingers, so he grabs hold of the breast and he starts sucking on the breast, just like he would to his mother. And he's holding the breast and he just keeps sucking, and he wouldn't stop. And immediately he begins to suck the life hairs out of this demon who couldn't take it anymore, and she's trying to push him away. Child, get away from me, get away from me. And he kept sucking, and then she couldn't hold her shape anymore, and she turned into this hideous demon. She goes running outside, and Krishna's still sucking away, and she left the town, and she comes crashing down on Kamsa's favourite orchard, his mango orchard, so destroyed his orchard there. And her body, how big, it was like huge, I forget how many kilometres long, and then everybody goes looking for Krishna. Krishna's playing on top of the Putana witch. And so they took him down from a Putana witch. And what I really like about this is that after the Putana witch dried up within a couple of months, they used her as firewood. I thought, how appropriate. Wouldn't it be nice to have a Putana witch out the back here where we could just chop some firewood and not have to worry about firewood out the back here, which we have none of right now at this point in time. So, and not only that, but she smelled so wonderful. She smelled of Agari incense, so guru incense or something. So that was Krishna's pastime, that he was annihilating these demons and at the same time giving pleasure to devotees. But he was also a very naughty child. So as he grew older, he also entered the houses of all the gopis, stole yogurt and butter, and he became famous as the butter thief. Who knows the name of Krishna? Mukkunshaw. Yay, Mukkunshaw. Yay. So he's famously known as Mukkunshaw, the butter thief. So the gopis would complain, but Krishna would be sitting there. He'd always try to cover up his activities, just like an ordinary child. And the gopis would complain, but they'd be all in transcendental ecstasy, unknowingly having engaged in pastimes with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, of course, Krishna's aim was to please all of his devotees, so in all these different pastimes they engaged with them, they would become super pleased, even though there was the activity of stealing. This is what Prabhupada explains, that this type of stealing was a transcendental activity which gave pleasure to the devotees because it was devoid of any material contamination. So Krishna just did this. He didn't need the yogurt or the curd or the milk or the sweets, but he just wanted to give pleasure to the devotees because he's self-satisfied. So, of course, Srila Prabhupada, as I said, in the material world here, all these symptoms are there. We have these symptoms, we have these traits also of wanting to sort of fight and steal when we're young. I remember when I had 3 sons, and it was just inevitable that one son would do something to another one to start a fight. They just couldn't help it. They just couldn't sit still. Someone put his leg, Mom, he's got my leg across, he's got his leg across me, or the other one would be lying very happily in his little cot, and then the boy come along, take something and start crying. We knew what happened. They said, when that boy grows up, he's going to beat you up, which is what happened, right? So there's all this constant. If anybody's had sons, like 2 or 3 sons, or sons and daughters, that this is just a natural, like Prabhupada said, this is just natural. You can't stop it. It just keeps on going. So we can understand that. So with one more pastime about Krishna, I'm still going right for time, is that when Krishna left Vrindavan, just on his leaving Vrindavan, he was summoned by Kamsa to a wrestling match. And this is a pretty significant event. Not only did he have to leave Vrindavan and break the hearts of all the residents there, but he took on these 2 wrestlers, that this was the last of Kamsa's demons. This was the last of his stable. Krishna had already destroyed all the demons that Krishna, that he'd sent along to kill Krishna. We can read them in the Krishna books, how Krishna had so much fun pastimes that all the devotees were ecstasy, and they go, oh, Krishna destroyed this demon today, and he just tightened his belt, and he grabbed his bakasura, and he pulled his beak apart, and so forth and so on. So he had 2 left. He had these 2 wrestlers, Chanura and Mustika. And they were giants. They were really huge wrestlers who were professionals. And he thought, well, this is my last chance to get Krishna, so we'll invite him to a wrestling match. So then, of course, we hear about Krishna going to Mathura and having his pastimes in Mathura there, and facing off against these 2 wrestlers, Chanura and Mustika. And the people in the audience, they were sort of, some were rather dismayed at the unevenness of the match, because Krishna was saying to the wrestlers, oh, we're just young boys, we just play these fun games of wrestling in the forest, and now you're expecting us to fight with you. And the citizens are going, yeah, it's just this Kamsa is so evil that he's put these wrestlers there to destroy these 2 boys. But at the same time, there was all these different rasas going on in the crowd, that the ladies were seeing this beauty of Krishna, and they were seeing Cupid and all these wonderful, the wonderful beauty of Krishna. And the elderly people were sort of relating to Krishna as their son, and then the other people were seeing the unfairness of the match, that they were actually feeling a tinge of love for the Supreme Person, for Krishna as the Supreme. So they didn't see him as the Supreme Person, but they had all these emotions. And of course, the demons, they saw him as Vishnu, and he's a sworn enemy. And so the fight went on. The wrestlers were going, well, You purport to be little boys, but you've destroyed all these other friends of ours, so we know that you're actually got these powers, so stop talking, let's wrestle. So of course they had this wrestling match for Krishna's pleasure, and him and Balaram, they destroyed the wrestlers, and then they dispatched Kamsa. And so they dispatched the fear of the citizens who were totally harassed by all these demons. So, and then of course Krishna went into the next stage. So Lord Chaitanya also appeared as a Yuga avatar, but he didn't come to annihilate the miscreants in that fashion by force, because he didn't come as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He came as a devotee to establish this Yuga Dharma. And as we know, Lord Chaitanya was an incarnation of Radha and Krishna, had this shimmering golden complexion, the same as Radharani's. And the traits were there from the beginning. He exhibited the same traits as Krishna, that enjoyed pastimes as a naughty child. Like the same way as Krishna, he tried to avoid getting in trouble with his parents. But sometimes when he went too far, then the parents complained, so Mother Yasoda came to the stage where she'd have to chastise them. But at the same time, he was just engaging all the other citizens around him in his pastimes, because in the Chaitanya Lila, all the associates of of Krishna in Vrindavan took birth in Mayapur, in Chaitanya Lila, so they were all there as well as the demigods. What was interesting to note was that when Krishna, in his form, his original form, dispatched and fought with the fought and dispatched the demons, Nimai also, in his childhood, he would pick on the Brahmanas and the demigod worshippers, because these Brahmanas were Mayavadis and impersonalists. We know that Vedacharya prayed for Lord Chaitanya to come, Supreme Personality of Godhead to come, so he could get rid of all this Mayavadism and impersonalism, which just completely saturate all over Mayapur and Navadvip and all the demigod worshippers. So Lord Chaitanya, as Nimai, Nimai in his youth would harass them. So he'd get the Brahmanas and he'd pull them under the water, he'd throw sand on their offerings, and the girls, they would go to the banks of the river and they'd pray to the demigods for a good husband. So he would come and eat their fruit, whatever they offered. And in a joking manner, he would tell them that he was the husband they were looking for. Then they would go complain to Mother Sachi about his activities, but his mother would be charmed by him, and he'd be sitting there and she could, how could my Nimai do this? And she would sort of pacify the ladies, and everyone who saw Nimai saw his wonderful transcendental form, and they would feel that sheer transcendental ecstasy. And even though they didn't know his Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were in complete ecstasy. So these same girls, even though he treated them roughly, they still looked out. They watched his back. They come up to him they'd come up to him and say, "Watch out! Your father's looking for you. Jagannath Mishra, he's got a stick. He's going to come and get you." So Nimai had been harassing the Brahmins, and they'd complain to Jagannath Mishra, "Do something about your son, or we'll have to do something." So Jagannath Mishra would be really upset, so he'd go looking for Nimai, and then the girls would warn him, say, "Nimai, go the back way." He'd come home and he'd be spattered in ink like he'd been studying at school, and had an ink pen and had ink all over him. "I never went to the river, I just went to school, I came straight back." And then Mother Yasoda believed him, and he'd have his bath and be all fresh, and Jagat Mishra would come back and said, "How come you're here?" "No, I didn't go, I just came here." So he'd be totally confused. So these pastimes went on, and later on, as Nimai developed and he took shelter of Ishvarapuri, then he began to embark on that Yuga Dharma, which was to establish religious principles for this age. And then he became an exemplary devotee. And as a devotee, he began to develop symptoms of love of Godhead in the mood of Radharani. And it was such an intense mood, and so he attracted so many wonderful followers, like the 6 Goswamis, Rupa Sanatan, Raghunath Das Jiva Goswami, really unbelievable, astounding devotees and renunciates. And they went to Vrindavan, they wrote literatures on Vaishnavism, they excavated the places which we can go and see of Krishna's pastimes now. And from them we received the Caitanya Caritamrita through the mercy of Krishna Das Kaviraj, who elaborately describes the Lord's pastimes, the variegators of the Lord's pastimes. So this Caitanya Caritamrita is considered the cream of all Vedic knowledge. So if we fully understand the nature of Krishna's pastimes and Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, then we are able to go back to Godhead, just like Krishna says, Jamakama Chama Divyam Evam Yo Vedi Tattvata Chakvapuna Jama Nati Shoete Arjuna. The one who knows the transcendental nature and appearance of my pastimes does not have to take birth in this material world again, but attains to my eternal abode, where we're free from the contamination of the modes. So here we are here as devotees, and we're applying this process of Yuga Dharma that Lord Chaitanya has given us, the religion of this age, Prativite Chedato Dadahari Gram, that in every town and village the chanting the holy names of the Lord will resound. This is a prediction, this is a fact. So we're just engaging in this process, and we're trying to become good servants of Krishna and tools, like cogs in the wheel, or tools, as sometimes we put it, that enable this whole process to take shape. But as devotees, we're also aware of the potencies of Maya, because we are living in this material world, and Maya is very strong with the three modes of goodness, passion and ignorance. And we are careful not to be caught in this trap and become influenced by the three modes. So in the material world, the fighting and the stealing, that is just the symptoms, like Srila Prabhupada said, of lust, anger and greed. So we are careful as devotees not to get into that trap of fighting amongst ourselves. We're always warned. Srila Prabhupada said that the greatest danger we face in our society is that one of fighting amongst ourselves, which we have witnessed over the last few decades. So the warning is there. And stealing, misappropriating each other's property. Sometimes we have that sort of tendency to see something there and we say, well, this for us, we'll use it in Krishna's service, but someone else has taken charge of it. We know everything belongs to Krishna, but it is better if someone takes charge of Krishna's property there. So it is the right thing to actually ask someone, you're in charge of this particular piece of property there, can I use it in Krishna's service? To be very polite. Then we have a nice order there. So misappropriation sometimes causes a lot of grief. So the essence of being devotees and helping to spread this movement is being respectful to each other, and understanding each other's service and helping each other in the service, and giving each other a leg up on this path of Krishna consciousness. And so in this way, our life will be successful and our mission will be successful also. So thank you very much for sitting through this. Thank you, the great sages, for helping me say something. After Harinam last night, we had a hectic Harinam last night. There was so much going on. So would anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to make on this? Yes, Vaishnavi.
Thank you for the class, Prabhu. You were mentioning about Krishna's stealing that it wasn't tinged with material contamination, and if devotees want to use something, they should ask permission from the person who's been given that service or being in charge of that. So we hear in Krishna consciousness that there's different aspects involved in service. There's also intention, and then there's the action. So even though, like we heard in Prabhupada's time, that devotees would go and steal the plants that the council would plant in the street and then use it in Krishna's service, but then that had material contamination. Would there be some benefit still because the intention was right? Or?
Well, sometimes it's you have what did you say? You have intention, and what else was the other one?
Action.
Huh?
Action.
Action, and there's a third one to that too. It's called discretion, right? So that's also sometimes actually always discretion is required when you are stealing things purportedly for Krishna. You have to, with your discretion, you have to do the maths. Are you going to actually, what is the consequence of this? And usually the consequences of stealing aren't very good, because even if you do it for Krishna, there is some consequences. Like the devotees one time went to this orchard nursery and stole a lot of flowers in the beginning. You know, this is a sort of misinterpretation. Oh, Krishna will steal for Krishna. So they got all these flowers and they decorated the Rath Yatra car that looked absolutely stunning. And when it went on television, the Hare Krishnas had the parade there, the annual parade there in the streets of Melbourne. The person whose flowers were stolen noticed that his flowers decorated the car, right? So there was some attrition there. So we have to use discretion, and usually with stealing it is not recommended. Prabhupada didn't approve of it. He sometimes overlooked it as indiscretion on the part of his devotees, but he never told the devotees to steal anything like that. And I was always meditating on the fact that sometimes devotees like to steal sweets. You know, you have some gulab jams or you have some burfi there or something. It's almost legitimate to do that if somebody leaves it lying around, but any stealing always causes grief to the person who's the victim. So it's always good, from my point of view, not to actually tamper with that concept of stealing, just to actually settle for what is available to you and be happy with that. Okay. Yes.
Just on what you were saying, I was remembering that when Pankajamri Prabhu left his body and we had a memorial here, one of the devotees who was had visited Mayapur, she was saying that once because we know that it's bona fide to steal Mahaprasadam, but this is very interesting. She said that she stole some prasadam that was for the shop, for the Maha shop, for selling. And the devotees who were running that shop, they were really disturbed, and then they went to tell Pankajamri Prabhu. And she was saying that he was very kind, but she got the message across that she shouldn't steal, because he just looked at her, he said, oh, you know what you did. So then she returned the sweets. But yeah, what you are saying is that, yeah, it's not right, because it disturbs someone else in their service.
Yeah, I heard that story too, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Jai, oh, Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Thank you.